When Conrad said,
"I'm excited to meet all your friends,"
it was a reminder that Belly has this whole entire new life that Conrad knows nothing about. In this scene in Season 3, Episode 11, where Belly and Conrad are getting ready to go to Belly's pre-birthday dinner, they're back in her apartment in Paris, and the way that Conrad is looking around at her apartment and all of her belongings, it almost feels like he's in a museum just taking it all in.
Just a few minutes, I promise.
You're good, take your time.
Et deux par deux, sans compter nos morts.
So we can see that Conrad is looking around almost in wonder. He's realizing that Belly has this whole life and this whole world that he knows nothing about. And I think that's probably kind of an interesting experience for him because him and Belly have known each other their whole entire lives. I think up until they parted ways after their breakup, they probably would have said that they knew everything about each other and knew all of each other's really significant life moments. But now he's getting a window into a version of Belly that he really doesn't know. You see him looking at the photos of her friends on the wall, and these are all people that, like I said, he doesn't know. He doesn't know how they met Belly. He doesn't know the dynamic of their friendship. And I imagine that it makes him feel a little bit like he's on the outside of Belly's life looking in. I thought it was kind of funny how he sits down on her bed and then quickly gets back up. I think it's kind of universally known that sitting on somebody's bed is very personal. That's obviously one of their most personal spaces, and I think he feels like he probably shouldn't be sitting there unless invited, so he quickly gets up. And I think it's a very small detail that's quite telling to Conrad's mindset and how he feels about him and Belly kind of seeing each other again after all of this time. There was a time when he probably would have thought nothing of that. If you think back to all of the summers they spent together at the beach house in Cousins, I don't think he would have thought twice about, coming into Belly's room while she's in there and they're chatting and laughing and sitting down on her bed. But now, things have changed. You can see how he kind of moves around her apartment with a little bit of trepidation. And then he picks up a book on her desk or nightstand and takes a look at what she's reading. And I think on one hand, it's him kind of peeking into her current life with a lot of curiosity. So I was very curious about this book that Belly's reading because in typical Jenny Han fashion, I thought maybe it means something. And so I'm just going to kind of quickly read you the description. Now, I don't speak French, so I'm not going to actually try to pronounce anything. It's a nonfiction book by French author Annie Ernaux, and it's described as a collective autobiography that chronicles the period from 1941 to 2006 through the lens of memory, cultural shifts, and personal experience. It's an account of post-war French history, consumerism, and the passage of time. So I thought it was interesting that it's an autobiography that marks the passage of time. Kind of mirrors what we see with Belly. We've seen the past year in her life in Paris marking the passage of time and how she's healed over the last year. Now Conrad is taking a peek into this book that she's reading and also taking a peek into her life and what she's been up to for the past year. Then Conrad keeps looking around Belly's apartment as she continues to get ready, and when he crosses over to the other wall, he notices some pictures of Belly and her friends, and most notably, he notices some pictures with Belly and Benito.
It's a really great apartment.
Thanks, I inherited it from my friend Gemma. You'll meet her tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to my old place, it's like Versailles.
I'm excited to meet all your friends.
Et toi par
It's interesting to notice Conrad taking in the photos of Belly and Benito, and you can kind of see the wheels turning in his head where he probably remembers this morning when he came to surprise Belly that Benito dropped her off on his scooter. And I'm sure he's been wondering ever since that point exactly who he is, and now he sees these photos of him in her apartment, and I think it's safe to say that he's wondering if they are in a relationship together. And now in this point in the episode, we don't actually know for sure if Belly and Benito have broken up. At this point, we don't know if she went to Mexico or not with him. We all had our theories. I, going into this episode, felt like they were broken up and felt like she did not go to Mexico with him. But technically, we don't know that at this point in watching the episode. You kind of see this look flash across his face when he sees the picture of them together, and he kind of looks down and he has, a bit of a sad expression on his face, and I wonder if it comes to his mind at that point that when he came here all the way to Paris to see Belly, he didn't really consider that she could be in a relationship. Or maybe he did, and he thought this is still something that he has to do for himself. But it becomes very real when you see, a photo of them together. And again, he says, I'm excited to meet all your friends, and we're kind of reminded that she has this whole world that he's not really privy to, despite the fact that they've known each other their whole lives. So then Conrad spots Junior Mint in the corner of Belly's bedroom, and he's kind of hit with this memory and flashback. So watching Conrad's memory of how he gifted Junior Mint to Belly is very interesting when you contrast it with the way that Belly remembered that. I'm going to do a separate video directly comparing their two memories, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to point out the fact that it's very clear in Conrad's flashback that he was excited to potentially, win Junior Mint for Belly, and he was kind of confused by the fact that Belly left and didn't kind of seem as into it. And we know, looking back on what happened, that the way Belly remembers it is she thought that Conrad had a crush at that girl who was, working there. And so she was disappointed and kind of walked off to go do something else. But we see here in Conrad's memory that he wanted her to kind of stay there with him. And this girl who was working there is not even like a central focal point in Conrad's memory. In fact, we don't really even see much of her in Conrad's memory. She's kind of faced the other way. In Conrad's memory, it's focused on him trying to win the bear and looking around and kind of wishing Belly was there. And then when he presents Belly with Junior Mint, he's kind of disappointed that her reaction is, sort of lackluster. You see him look up at her face and it's a little bit heartbreaking. I felt so sad kind of watching the way his face looks. He's looking at her face, like hoping for a positive reaction from her, and he doesn't get that. And it's such a stark reminder that Belly and Conrad have always had these feelings for each other, but they've continually let their sort of unique views on each situation cloud that. They just haven't been on the same page in terms of the facts of everything that's happened. In Belly's version of this memory, she feels rejected by Conrad, and in Conrad's version of this memory, he feels rejected by Belly. And it's just the ultimate miscommunication. So then Belly emerges and she's ready for the party, and this is what happens next.
You look really beautiful.
Thank you.
Les deux
Look who I found.
deux. On n'a pas no more.
So when Belly comes out of the bathroom, Conrad looks at her and he's just she takes his breath away. You can see it on his face. And he tells her, wow, you look really beautiful. And you can see that he's just basically stunned. And I don't blame him. Belly looked incredible. She looked amazing this entire episode. Her whole look for her birthday dinner was just phenomenal. I know there's a lot of discourse around whether or not people like her bob. And Lola Tung has confirmed that it was a wig with like the front pieces being her own hair, like her layers. And I actually thought it was just dependent on how the wig of the bob was sitting in each scene. In some scenes it looked amazing. And in others I can see that you could sort of tell that it didn't look quite as realistic. But overall I really liked it. I thought it looked really good in this scene. And just even like her dress, her makeup, I just thought she looked like a very different Belly. I mean, I've said this before, Belly is beautiful throughout the years. Lola Tung is gorgeous. But I think it's important to note that Conrad hasn't really seen Belly like this before. Like, this is very much the Parisian version of Belly. Her style is a little bit different in Paris. She's wearing a little bit more makeup. Even her clothing style has changed. And that's totally okay. I think it's really fun to experiment with your style. And for all of us, our style changes as we age. What's really interesting about this for me is the fact that they haven't seen each other in a year. And Belly does look quite different. And it's sort of a physical manifestation of the fact that she's gone through a lot of changes. And I'm sure that Conrad knows that emotionally she has changed a lot given everything, that's gone on in the past year and the past few years. But seeing her look so different is probably, just like I said, a physical reminder of that. We also do know that Conrad has never been, the focus for him has not been on her looks. In season 1, episode 1, we all remember him telling her that he likes how she looked with her glasses. I think we can tell throughout the show that even though Belly has had her insecurities and her beliefs about when Conrad started having feelings for her, it's been pretty confirmed by Conrad's point of view that he always thought she was beautiful. And so when he compliments her and tells her that she looks beautiful, she does look a little bit kind of awkward. She says thank you, but doesn't seem to know how to receive that compliment. Throughout their interactions in this episode so far, they've been fairly formal with each other. Like I said, they haven't seen each other in a year. Belly wasn't expecting to see him, so it's not like she was able to really prepare. So there is this kind of formal dynamic between them that's, a little bit interesting when you think about the fact that they known each other their entire lives. They grew up as childhood friends, they dated, but again, so much has happened between them and they haven't seen each other in a year, so they're kind of testing the waters and kind of maintaining this formal dynamic for now. We saw a glimpse of that formal dynamic kind of falling away when they had the rooftop conversation, which I still will be covering. It'll probably be one of my next videos, but it stands out here when, he gives her a compliment and she kind of, you can tell she doesn't really know how to take it. And I think part of that too is she's flustered by seeing Conrad, and now he's right in front of her and she has to sort of grapple with how she feels about that. You can also tell there's sort of this tension between them, and I think that contributes to the awkwardness because maybe Belly is sort of fighting this tension. So now we see Belly kind of struggle to put her bracelet on herself, and Conrad steps in to help.
Oublier ce que l'on a connu, qui a imprégné nos peaux et 3 pas. Au couteau et on peut partager le même lit.
We should go.
Do I look okay?
Yeah. Now we can go.
So there were so many things I really loved about this part of the scene. I love how Conrad sees Belly struggling with her bracelet and says, "Let me do it." It's kind of a callback to the fact that Conrad has said before that anytime he sees Belly struggling or needing help, he steps in. He just can't help himself. We even remember him saying that in season 5 in this part.
When Belly needs help with something, my first thought has historically been, how do I fix it?
They haven't had a lot of physical touch so far other than their sort of very formal hug when he first surprises her outside her apartment. And you can see how affected Belly is. We know so far in this episode that Belly has been trying to act very calm and cool and collected, but if you paid attention, you could see her kind of stealing all of these little glances. I mean, they've both been doing that, but it's really noticeable in this scene. You know, she keeps kind of looking down and then looking up at him out of the corner of her eye. They're standing very close together. He's doing the same thing. We don't have Belly's internal dialogue, so we don't really know what she's thinking, but I think you can kind of tell from these little moments. I mean, the way that she is looking at him when she steals these glances is not very platonic or unaffected to me. And speaking of Belly acting calm and cool and collected, when she first comes out and Conrad says to her, "Look who I found," about Junior Mint, she kind of doesn't really react. And it reminds me of Conrad's flashback when he presents her with Junior Mint and she kind of has this underwhelming reaction. And in that scene, we know that Belly was very affected. And I think it's safe to assume that she is just as affected here, but she's trying to keep that calm and cool facade. So anyway, back to this bracelet moment. After Conrad finishes fastening her bracelet, they just kind of have this moment where they are gazing at each other. And I almost thought that they would kiss in this moment because that's what it looks like. And once again, you can tell that they're both very affected. You can almost see this gravitational pull between them that's always existed. And now here they are in close quarters again. And you can just tell there's something between them. It's undeniable. And when she says thank you, he just kind of does this little blink and nod. And again, it's Chris Briney's acting that I love. He's not over the top. His expressions are so subtle. His like sort of micro expressions just tell a larger story about what he's feeling. And it's always in these moments that I'm reminded that he was perfectly cast as Conrad. So as they're kind of gazing at each other and it seems like something could almost happen between them, Belly sort of breaks that spell. And again, it's very obvious that she's fighting whatever she's feeling. And she says, "We should go." And I kind of loved the next part where Conrad asks if he looks okay.
We should go.
Do I look okay?
Yeah. Now we can go.
I sort of like seeing Conrad in this little bit of self-conscious mode. It's almost like a role reversal. We remember in season 1, Belly was always thinking about, you know, how Conrad might be perceiving her. And we sort of, like I said, see a bit of that role reversal here. And we have this really playful moment, which again is another break in Belly's cool and calm facade where she messes up his hair. And it's most certainly a callback to this moment in season 1.
I liked you better with glasses.
Too bad. I like me better without them.
Love the way that Jenny Han parallels scenes, and it makes rewatches really fun. So I just absolutely loved this scene in Belly's apartment. You're probably going to hear in every scene that I analyze, I'm going to say, oh, it was one of my favorite scenes because I just loved almost every scene in this episode. And I want to take a moment to mention the song that was playing in the background, this beautiful French song. Like I said, I don't speak French, so I looked it up out of curiosity, and apparently it's sung by a Canadian artist, which I love. If you didn't know, I'm Canadian. I was reading the translation of the lyrics, and there was one line in the lyric that really stood out to me. Actually, there was 2 lines in the lyrics that stood out to me. I'm going to read them to you. So one says, "And I don't know what to think about. It's hard to be free like you." And I can't help but wonder if that is tied somehow to Conrad's probably perceiving Belly as being very free in Paris, even if that's not 100% how Belly feels, and she kind of struggled at the beginning of her time there. But it seems like as he was looking around her apartment, he probably has this perception that this is a very free kind of new version of Belly. And then there was another line in the lyric that says, "And 2 by 2 we swallow our words." I definitely tied this back to the fact that the 2 of them are definitely swallowing their words. They have so much that they want to say to each other. They have so much still unsaid at this point in the episode. Conrad, you know, like I said, has come all the way to Paris, and Belly has been sort of shocked to see him. They're spending this day together, and you see these moments where they're stealing glances and they're looking at each other, and you can tell there's so much running through their minds, but they haven't really said any of the big stuff to each other yet in this episode. So like I said, I absolutely adored this scene. I thought it was really fun to see Conrad kind of take a peek into Belly's life just through looking at where she lives. And I do think him helping her put her bracelet on has kind of broken that sort of touch barrier for them. When we saw how affected Belly was by that, it obviously meant something to her too. So this leads them into going to Belly's birthday dinner, which I will absolutely be covering that part of the episode. I've had a lot of requests for that. Belly's birthday dinner was my absolute favorite part, I think, of this episode. I keep saying that. I just say that about every scene. But so I've been kind of saving it and hanging on to it because I think it was just the most delicious scene for so many reasons. So that is coming up soon as well. And I've mentioned this, but I just started a YouTube channel. I'm planning to post longer videos on there, and I'm planning to kind of do these deep dives into The Summer I Turned Pretty for now, but other shows eventually, and tying it back to sort of discussions about relationships and love and the way we view ourselves, because those kind of deeper conversations are what I would love to get into, but I think YouTube is probably a better platform for those like long conversations. So I'll probably be putting my first video up on YouTube sometime later this week. The link is in my bio if you're interested. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this scene in season 3, episode 11.